Really interesting fight, Matt, on our main card, a women's bantamweight between Karol Rosa and Sijara Eubanks. Matt, a lot of people very familiar with one of these fighters, of course, Sijara Eubanks. I mean, she was supposed to make it to the finals of the women's flyweight inaugural title fight off of the Ultimate Fighter, taking on Nico Montano. Of course, weight cutting complications and steps Roxanne Modafferi. And weight cutting was always an issue for her at 125. I mean, she bit back against the haters. It just didn't work for her. She moved up to 135, didn't have a lot of success at the start. I mean, if you look at the fights that she had, you would have thought, you're taking on Aspen Ladd. Maybe there's a chance. That was a way too big of a step up to start with. She loses that fight by decision. She fights Betch Kahea. It wasn't a good fight. She lost that one as well. Rowdy Betch hitting herself in the face and having a weird round in her last time out. But overall, I mean, her last performance against Sarah Morris, every media member that scored it on MMA Decisions had it 30-27 for her. One of the judges in the actual fight scored it 30-26 and gave her 10-8 in the last round. She put on a really good performance against somebody that a lot of people are familiar with, the Canadian cheesecake, Sarah Morris, who, listen, she was coming off a really big win in her fight before that from UFC 242 in Abu Dhabi. She got a big finish win there. What does that mean in this one? Well, Sijara Eubanks. At 35, weight cutting is not as big of an issue, right? You know how good her wrestling is. Her top game's very, very good. And if you look at it, I mean, size-wise, you'd think against a lot of bantamweights, she matches up kind of oddly. She's normally going to be undersized against some of these bantamweights. Karol Rosa is kind of an odd fighter because she has a 1-inch height advantage. She has a little bit in terms of reach, but not a whole lot. But she's been fighting bigger fighters for her entire career. And for a fighter to be this young at 25 years old, she's getting a little bit closer to 26, 13-3 record, so has more pro experience. But she's been fighting big names since she was on the regional scene. I mean, if you bring up her Tapology page, she has 2 fights against Giselle Mohea, one on the regional scene. She loses that one by decision. Then she beats her and finishes her. She has a fight against Larissa Pacheco, and you might think, well, I know Larissa from her time in the UFC. Well, do you know Larissa Pacheco when she fought in the lightweight finale against Kayla Harrison at PFL? She's fought Melissa Gatto. She didn't win. Gatto, I'd love to see her UFC debut if it's going to happen, maybe sometime soon. But she was always fighting really good regional talent. It seems to be in Brazil, you have a lot of women's bantamweights that you can compete against. And then for Rosa in the UFC, you look at her first fight against Lara Procopio. It was a split decision win, a lot of strikes thrown by both women. Then you look at her fight against Vanessa Mello, and she took over. I mean, again, you look at the cards, 30-26, 29-27, 30-26. I had it 30-26 for Rosa. I might have even scored one of those rounds like a 10-7. She ran away with some of them. I mean, the first round, all over it. In total, 177 of 289 for total strikes. And the most surprising thing, and I haven't even brought it up, she is an excellent jiu-jitsu practitioner. She's won a lot of medals in South America. We can go through it, but great grappling, really volume heavy striking, maybe not a ton of power. And I wouldn't put too much, stock into a win over Vanessa Mello at this point, but still all signs are, kind of pointing in the right direction for Rosa in this one. But Sijara Eubanks is not an easy out.
So Sijara Eubanks is kind of interesting because I say the best that she's ever looked was actually in that loss to Aspen Ladd the second go around when she did move up in weight. That was a fight of the night. A lot of people don't remember that, but it was a really quality fight. And it was a fight where Sijara Eubanks, you finally saw that she could at least physically match a lot of those bigger fighters at 135 because you thought size would be an issue for her moving up in weight. But Aspen Ladd, one of the bigger 135ers, actually has shown making 135. So the fact that Eubanks was able to at least kind of physically match up with her a little bit in that fight was a really good sign for her going forward. Now, she lost that, then fought Betch Kohea. You know my feelings on Betch Kohea. I don't think she's the best. And Betch was, again, it was one of those fights that she was just able to out-busy Sijara Eubanks, where Eubanks, you could tell that when she threw, she seemed to be the better of the two fighters. It's just Betch Kohea just so happened to throw a lot more at Eubanks, was able to get the decision. Eubanks' last win, you bring up Sarah Morris. She's a good fighter, but, it's not – beating her is probably equivalent to beating a Vanessa Mello. You're not going to learn that much about the fighter. It's just kind of a solid UFC win. And I think Karol Rosa, if she can stay on her bike and really move and make Sijara Eubanks work, I know Eubanks got a 10-8 in the third round of her last fight, but cardio for the majority of her career has been a bit of an issue. As the fight goes on, if you do get her to throw kind of an optimal amount of volume, she will wear out as the fight goes on, whereas Rosa – She can throw that really high volume and sort of keep that same pace throughout the fight. And I think if she is able to sort of just stick, move, stay on her bike throughout the majority of this fight, she should be able to win decision over Eubanks.
Yeah, I mean, I'll bring it up here and I'll kind of go through it a little bit. So I talked about it, the fact that Rosa has that jiu-jitsu background. I mean, maybe they're not, we're not talking about black belt jiu-jitsu tournaments like a Mackenzie Dern, but BJJ world champ at blue belt, BJJ Pan American champ at blue belt, submission world champion blue belt, and then at brown belt, again, BJJ Pan American and no-gi Pan American champ. So it does mean something. And those were open weight tournaments as well. So a little interesting there. And just to get an idea, because you might look at Karol Rosa's stats just off her UFC fights and think, geez, she's a volume striker. So that's her path to victory. And it worked for Betch Cahill, so it's going to work here. But there's a lot more working for Karol Rosa. I am a little bit surprised. If you look over at the Tapology votes, 592 on this fight, 73% going with Rosa, 86% by decision. And then if you look at the odds, they're pretty darn close. So we've seen that a lot so far on this card where there's close odds, but actually a lot of the fans are going with a certain fighter over another. So Karol Rosa here, about a minus 139 favorite. A lot of money has come in on Sijara Eubanks. Rosa opened as a plus 180 underdog, or sorry, a minus 180 favorite. Eubanks opened as a plus 140 underdog. She's sitting at about a plus 115. So to really put that into perspective, because I almost got my tongue tied there, there's been a lot of money that came in right off the hop when the line dropped on Sijara Eubanks. Everything's kind of leveled off since then. Kind of a bit of a surprise to me. And again, there is a path to victory for Sijara Eubanks. I think if she's able to just hold Rosa down, she certainly has an advantage in that one respect. It's just tough because, again, Aspen Ladd's really good. I mean, you might be down on her because of the Durandamy loss. It wasn't an early stoppage, whatever. But you might be down on Aspen Ladd because of some of her performances. And you might be down on Eubanks because of the fight against Betch Cahill. But again, we've seen flashes of brilliance. You saw her this close to fighting Nico Montano. And who knows, if she had that fight, maybe she would have beaten Montano and become the inaugural UFC women's flyweight champ. Maybe she would have had a crazy fight against Valentina Shevchenko. We don't know, but we have her where she's at this point in her career. The other interesting thing, and I kind of talked about it from Rosa's perspective, but the flip side, Eubanks at this point in her career, 35 years old, 10 years older than the Brazilian Rosa. I don't think that plays too much into effect. Again, I think the change from 25 to 35 massively helps Eubanks here. What do you make of this one, and what's kind of your final pick?
I'm going to go with Rosa again. The path to victory on Eubanks is outvolume her, make her frustrated, make her really lunge on her punches, and she will overcommit a lot of the times. And with Rosa, that's kind of what she does really well anyways. She can move, she can throw a high volume, she can really keep the pace up. So if she sticks to her game plan, I do think she'll be able to win it. But like you said, if Eubanks wants to win this fight, she might have to make it boring. Hold her up against the cage. Just try to keep her in front of you. And you might not have to land, really damaging shots every time, but just the control might be able to win Eubanks rounds as the fight goes on. But I do think Rosa will be able to kind of out-volume, find her shots, pick them, and then win the fight.
I'm going to go with Rosa, but this isn't one, like, I wouldn't get all excited about this and say, ooh, this is a juicy parlay pick, and then come in here after and trash everybody in the comments. So, but I do want to know what everybody's going with here, because I could see this going either way. A lot of people going Rosa's way. And depending on what you think of Sijara Eubanks and kind of the antics at 25, at 35, and especially in her last fight, and even in the Ladd fight, she's given a good account of herself. So we're both going with Karol Rosa. You're going to want to keep it locked in because we have an extended preview of our main event between Alistair Overeem and Augusto Sakai at heavyweight. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt. And as we always say, let's get into it.